All right, I think we might be ready to get started. We are just 1 minute after the hour, so I think we'll get going. The number is rising just a little bit, so welcome to everyone who's just getting logged on, and good morning and afternoon to everyone. I'd like to welcome you all to the third Turn the Tide panel discussion. My name is Katie Shea, and I'm the Vice President of Student Affairs and the University Registrar here at Ashford University, and I'm so pleased to be here moderating today. Before we do dive into today's discussion, though, I first would like to thank each of you for showing up today. All of our days get filled up and we're all juggling so much. And when our days become long and overwhelming, I think sometimes opportunities like today's panels are the ones that get skipped and can give everyone an hour back in their day. But I think we can all agree these conversations are so important, not only for our personal growth, but for the growth of those around us, our families, our friends, and especially our students. So thank you again. And please encourage your team members who have not been able to attend or have maybe lost their drive to continue this conversation to show up and participate. It's so important for our community here at Ashford. So on to today's topic, safety. The word safety, I'm sure, carries something different for everyone. The purest definition is the state of being safe, the condition of being protected from harm and other non-desirable outcomes. Safety can also refer to the control of recognized hazards in order to achieve an acceptable level of risk. Today, I'm joined by three amazing colleagues as your panelists, Kingsley Jackson, Debbie Halewood, and Dr. Yolande Harper. And I'd like to thank each of them for being here today, and also I'd like each of them to take some time to introduce themselves and share what safety means to each of them before we get started. So Kingsley, would you like to start us off?
Sure thing. Thank you so much, Katie. Good morning, good day, good afternoon, everyone. Kingsley Jackson, I'm very excited to be here with you. I've been serving the mission of Ashford since 2012. And in my current role, I have the unique opportunity to facilitate the academic resolution process in the Office of Student Affairs. When I think of the word safety, I first think of it as described by Maslow, as being a basic human need, a need for security in life, right after food, water, and rest. When I consider being safe, as Katie has already pointed out, I think there's no presence of harm, no danger, no threat present. I feel I am safe in my home. I'm in a state of being safe in my home. When I think about what it means for me to feel safe, to do this, I must consider threats that I might face when I leave my home. Concerns for my safety extend to how I prepare myself to navigate a world that might treat me as a threat for something that I can't control, like the color of my skin. Being a walking definition of what someone else might define as a threat to their feeling of safety has been extremely impactful in my life and has contributed to my own definition of what it means for me to feel safe. Simply put, I feel most safe when I remind myself that as a person of color, I must live by a different set of rules for survival. I feel most safe when I'm able to operate in spaces where there's a greater presence of objectivity and less room for subjectivity. And I feel safe when my loved ones, my brothers, my sisters, my nephews, nieces, my godchildren, are not taking the extraordinary risk of exposing the harsh and complex realities of race, class, and identity to simply walk to school, take public transportation, and conduct basic operations in society. Safety to me means being educated and well prepared to handle the things that I might not be able to control.
Thank you so much, Kingsley. Dr. Harper?
Hi, thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Yolande Harper. I'm honored to be included in this panel. I teach in the College of Arts and Sciences in the programs of Applied Behavioral Science, Psychology, and Health and Human Services, and I joined Ashford in 2013. So what does safety mean to me? Well, my first thought was that there are different aspects of safety, as Kingsley so aptly reminded us. There's certainly the physical safety that some have to deal with because of different and various aspects of their identities: flying while Muslim, driving while brown or Black, walking or being affectionate in public while gay, etc. And so I'm fully aware of the fact that some individuals have a much higher risk of physical injury or death because of hate crimes, professional profiling that's combined with fear, and various unconscious biases that lead to culturally incompetent decisions in healthcare settings that put people's lives at risk. And so first, I want to acknowledge that physical safety concerns are very real for some, for many, and at the same time, be clear that today my comments are geared toward another facet of safety, that being psychological safety, which is an interpretation. Our sense of safety is based on conclusions that we draw in any given moment, and those conclusions depend on the interaction of both objective threats, real threats, and our subjective perceptions of those threats and our ability to overcome them. Some objective threats might be loss of job, grading discrimination, missing out on a career opportunity, bullying, microaggressions, discriminatory slurs, unintentional slights based on egocentric biases or ethnocentrism, that lead people to make stereotypical or otherwise inaccurate assumptions and comments. And then there's the subjective aspect that comes by blending our own personal emotions, our own personal histories, personality dispositions like openness, optimism, pessimism, fearfulness, adventurousness, courage, fatigue, burnout, available energy levels, and overall self-esteem and senses of resiliency, etc. So being cognizant or aware of the interaction between the interpersonal and the intrapersonal in the way we co-create our safe and unsafe psychological realities, my concept of safety is co-creating spaces in which all members of our community can authentically be their most loving, creative, effective, and positively energized selves. So that's what safety means to me. And a few pillars for me include the golden and platinum rules, my choice to assume that the intentions of others are positive first, unless proven otherwise, and even then to assume that there's some good and value within them, even if it's not being demonstrated with vigor in the current moment. So again, co-creating spaces in which all members of our community can authentically be their most loving, creative, effective, and positively energized selves. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yolanda. That was amazing. And hopefully you guys are already getting a sense that we're creating a safe place for us all to come together today and have a conversation. So Debbie, you want to finish us out?
Sure. Yeah. And I apologize. There's like some road work right in front of my house and they started as soon as we started. So of course the timing's always wonderful, but hopefully you can hear me. I don't know what I can add to what my colleagues have mentioned here. I think they both did a beautiful job of defining safety for themselves. And those are concepts and aspects of safety that I definitely hold on to. So I'm Debbie Halewood. I live in Oceanside, California. I've been at Ashford for, it's been about 11 and a half years full time. I'm an old timer, seen a lot of change. And, for me, safety is ensuring that who I am, and there's multiple facets of, me and my identity, who I am is comfortable in the space that I am in that moment. And as Dr. Harper had mentioned, there's a lot in terms of not just physical safety, but also psychological safety. I think that's just as important. And I think those are two concepts that we're going to have to consider when we're having this conversation as well. So I'll leave it at there because I think my colleagues did a beautiful job of explaining, and we'll just get into the questions too.
Okay, let's do it. Let's get into the questions. So Yolanda, I'm going to pose this first one to you, and you kind of touched on a little bit in your intro, but oftentimes safe place is seen as coddling in regards to social justice. How can I help create a safe place seen as valuable and respected by my colleagues?
Thank you, Katie. Yes, that is an interesting question. It is written first as if coddling is a bad thing. When I think of coddling, I think of being warm, welcoming, and communicating value for self and others. Of course, I am aware of the other connotations associated with coddling as being overindulgent, overprotective. And to this, I would say that if we are so fearful of being seen as discriminatory that we are walking on eggshells to the point of it actually interfering with the effective communication needed to get our work done, yeah, we have a problem, definitely. How can we help create safe places seen as valuable and respected by our colleagues? I mentioned earlier the golden and platinum rules, treating others as we would like to be treated in terms of valuing and respecting them in life-affirming ways. That would be the golden rule part of it. And showing that value and respect in ways that are personally meaningful to them, not the way we want the respect to be shown, but the way that feels respectful to them. That's the platinum part of it. Allowing individuals to define and name themselves and to change their names over time if they so desire. Because truth be told, the default labels that we choose to describe others say more about who we are rather than about who they are. I think we can do this by modeling openness and healthy boundaries, and by communicating and modeling that it's safe to be wrong and to make a mistake. I'm reminded of a quote, you know, a perfect tree never existed. An imperfect tree never existed. A tree just is perfectly imperfect and imperfectly perfect. So with that, then it creates a safe space for us to be able to admit when we're wrong and to thank those who are willing to educate us. That's awesome. Thank you. I didn't know that. To be willing to learn from anyone. The elders in so many of the communities in which I'm a part of express in different ways that everyone can teach us something. Thus, you know, sometimes we do put ourselves out there, we make an opinion, but lead with, you know, please correct me if I'm wrong, or if this doesn't apply to you, please let me know. Also, we can look for connections, ways in which we're similar, while at the same time expressing genuine wonder and awe and interest and admiration in differences and uniquenesses that make our world an interesting and great place to be. Communicate that it's safe to be perceptive without being labeled as oversensitive or paranoid. And when people apologize for making mistakes, forgive, say, or tell them there's nothing to forgive. No apologies necessary. I appreciate your acknowledgement, but really, there's no apology is necessary. That's what we as humans do. Be willing to model the type of reflections that we're trying to elicit. So in one of my classes I teach, the instructor who designed the course, Dr. Danny Villa, he wrote a prompt to get students discussing their personal privilege. And I can tell you in 100% of the sections of this class that I've taught, most students begin saying they don't feel privileged. And when you've had some tough challenges in life and or have worked hard for what little you have, as is the case for many of our students, it's difficult to see privilege in your life. So to facilitate self-reflection, I talk about privilege as being contextual and that all of us can find settings in which we have some privilege and some settings in which we don't. And as an example, I out myself as a heterosexual, gender congruent female and the privilege of not having to worry about hate or harm coming to me in most settings if I choose to hold my companion's hand in public. And as a female, in comparison to my brothers with the same mom and dad, I'm less likely to be viewed as a physical threat to strangers than my own brothers are. That's an unearned privilege. And so with that, then it creates space for students to be able to see themselves as privileged. And even students who often think, oh, it's only those other people, whoever those other people are, who are privileged. Smile, I think, is a way we create safety. I know if you live in certain parts of the country, you don't smile at strangers, but we're online, so it's okay to smile. We do, and then self-reflect. Do we smile with equal warmth and delight when we see a couple holding hands, regardless of their ethnic makeup, their age, their gender, their religion, their partners, etc.? Do we smile with equal delight when we hear different languages being spoken in public places? Or do we get annoyed or even paranoid? For me, I see the languages and I hear they're all, I don't have to understand what people are saying. It's all music to me. So if we don't smile or have that inner sense of warmth and appreciation for those differences, then we are giving some privilege over others. And there are some unconscious biases at work. Why? Doing self-checks, I am a big proponent of. How does the positive energy, the warmth, the love, the respect, the light, that acceptance that we send out to some, or the negative energy, rejection, fear, distrust, disgust, hatred, anger, we send out to others, impact them and us? And also what we can do is be an ally without being a self-promoter. Some additional things I personally do in my class is I share an introductory video that silently communicates openness. So I have the word welcome in many languages. I have a photo of myself standing by the World Peace Gong in New Delhi, India, which, if you're not familiar with the gong, has religious symbols from many different religions around it. I have pictures of scholars that I appreciate and admire. Their names and their photos represent many types of diversity. I have examples of my favorite expressions from different cultures and different languages. I have examples of favorite songs from different genres. I greet students in a personal way, especially if I have a student that is courageous enough in this climate to say in their introduction that they're Muslim. I greet them with Assalamu alaikum. I affirm their choices as they explore the different topics. In a different class, there's a prompt about selecting an ethnic group to apply the principles we're studying to. And I remind them, of how many, there are many different ethnic groups, not just 2 or 3. And I had one student who was apologetic for choosing to write about being Irish Catholic. And I said, well, no, there's nothing to apologize for. And I showed her some literature about family therapy with Irish Catholics and some of their diversity and shared some excerpts from Monica McGoldrick's book on ethnicity and family therapy that discusses over 30 some odd different ethnic groups, and asked her to reflect on that, tell me what fits, what doesn't fit, as she blossomed around that. And I encourage viewing topics through a minimum of 3 different perspectives at all times. And lastly, for now, I'll just add, listen to the silence between the words. What is not being said? Who are we leaving out when we speak of social justice? I can guarantee you, whoever is being left, whoever is falling through the cracks in the silence in that moment is not feeling the environment is safe, optimally safe for them. Thank you.
I'm over here busy writing down so much that you just said, Yolanda. Thank you. Debbie, did you want to add on anything to that question? I know you had some thoughts on it.
Yeah, again, Dr. Harper did such a wonderful job of covering, a lot of my thoughts here, but I will add just a couple of thoughts real quick. I know the question was about ensuring that our spaces are safe without, coddling. And I think she did a really wonderful job of saying, hey, coddling doesn't necessarily have to be a negative thing, right? And I do appreciate that the comment around, ensuring that we're looking out for other individuals around us who maybe are not as represented, or maybe who is feeling as though they don't fit into this particular space. I think sometimes we have a tendency, and when I say we, I just mean in society, we have a tendency to group together with like-minded or people who have common interests. And we forget that there are maybe other people around us who either don't have those interests, aren't like-minded, or don't have the same experiences, the life experiences, or share the same identities. So, I'll give you a personal example. I'm a mixed race woman. I identify as a mixed race woman with a hidden disability. Now, I've had to use assistive devices in the past where at that moment, you can tell that I have a disability, but typically it's a hidden disability. And so I have been in many spaces where people have talked about, doing working out or adventures and things that I am unable to do because of my particular disability. They look at me and they make an assumption about me of having those abilities. And so it immediately makes me kind of fall back and feel as though I'm not in a safe space. And again, it's because assumptions have been made. And so I think one of the things that we have to make to consider when we're, what the question was about at work, but in general, when we're in groups of people, is to really be cognizant of, am I making an assumption about a person? Am I making an assumption about how that person thinks, what they value, their abilities, who they are as a person? So that way you stop yourself, and I do this all the time. I make these mistakes all the time, but you stop yourself from making those assumptions so that you're not putting them in a place that you're creating a barrier between the two of you. And so I do think that having this idea of safe spaces is really important, because we want to make sure that we are open to people feeling comfortable and confident around each other. So I just wanted to add that little extra spot.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great addition. Thank you, Debbie. Kingsley, I'm gonna send this one over to you, and I think it actually kind of builds on where Debbie just ended, so it's perfect. One aspect of feeling safe at work is building trust. What are the ways to help promote this sense of trust and safety in the workplace and my community?
Thank you so much, Katie. I completely agree. When Debbie was talking about assumptions, that is exactly where I wanted to pick up with this conversation in regards to building trust. It's important to me that I don't feel assumptions are being made about how I feel. I'm sure that's important to a lot of people, and it impacts how they feel safe in their community. Just want to share a little bit of a personal story. Shortly after the police killing of George Floyd, those events, I personally woke up afterwards to upwards of 25, 26 text messages, about 5 to 6 phone calls, and 2 emails from individuals that I don't have regular conversation with on a daily, monthly, or even annual basis. These are individuals I went to school with in the past, individuals I may have worked with in the past, people I may have not spoken to in over 10 years. The majority were not people of color. The content of their message was, how are you doing? Are you okay? You good? And they were responding to the events that had occurred that I was not aware of myself. When I received all these messages, I was sent in a little bit of a panic mode. I felt like something was going on around me that I had no idea. I thought maybe there was a fire. Didn't really know what was going on. So after my automatic practices of opening my social media up, I quickly learned what was happening in the world. I then tried to understand why all of these people felt the need to check on me specifically, especially people I haven't spoken to, I haven't talked to in quite a long time, people I may not be on speaking terms with. They were concerned about me, basically, and I didn't understand why. I didn't express any concerns of lack of safety or any impact to anyone, yet they were all making an assumption that maybe I was impacted, maybe I was hurt, maybe I was possibly angry, maybe I wanted to communicate. I share this to say, building trust within a community, within a workplace, really should start with something Dr. Harper spoke on earlier, and that was really that platinum piece of the golden rule of treating others the way that they really want to be treated. We hear the golden rule all the time, treat others in the way that you would like to be treated, but that psychological safety view, it's the opposite. Treat others the way that they would like to be treated. Take the time to ask your coworkers what they prefer regarding, things like check-ins, or what type of communication they like to receive, what type of feedback they would like to receive. This helps you better to work and communicate with others on your team in a way that they feel most comfortable. Some more ways to help build trust and foundation in the workplace and in your community. Welcome to curiosity. Sometimes things happen, decisions are made, and there's no explanation, there's no context, or there's no resolve. Be open to questions without any dismissive language. Continue to create an environment for learning and inquiry, despite any risk of uncertainty or vulnerability or discord. In this case, I like to think that curiosity should not kill the cat. Promote healthy conflict. It's not a fun thing to want to always step in the ring of conflict, but rather than avoiding conflict, we should create conditions for healthy forms of conflict, addressing a person's perspective in a way that you're able to demonstrate appreciation for that person while still challenging their idea. That might help to prevent a person from taking something personal and help to build trust. I think we spoke about that a little bit earlier as well. And lastly, both earn and extend trust. Recognize that it must be earned, trust must be earned, and it must be extended. We can't force others to trust. We can't force others to give us their trust. But ways to accomplish earning this trust is to tell the truth, admitting when you don't know something, admitting when you're wrong, explaining your thought process. I've had several opportunities to ask questions when I don't understand the thought process behind a decision made, and I was grateful that each time I was met with honesty and transparency from my leaders. They did not take it as a personal attack, but rather an opportunity to impact credibility, reliability, and intimacy, which all contribute to earning trust. I could continue to talk about ways to promote feeling safe at work within your community, but a lot of it is honestly based on how that individual connects to their feeling of safety. And that's important to remember. Is there anything the other panelists would like to share about feeling safe at work or in your community and building trust?
Thank you, Kingsley.
Thank you.
Well, hopefully you all will take the time to join the small group discussions and maybe dive in a little deeper into trust and creating those spaces where we can all come together. Debbie, I'm going to send the next question over to you. And it said, how can I deal with uncomfortable political conversations surrounding Black Lives Matter? I know if I speak my truth, I risk losing my job. For example, to me, all lives matter.
Yeah, this one's a tough one. This is a difficult conversation. And it's definitely a conversation, maybe not in the workplace, but a conversation I've had a lot in the last couple of years. So of course, the goal is that all lives matter, all lives should matter. But the current reality is that not all lives are treated as though they matter equally. So the phrase, all lives matter, it's often used as a reply when someone has said that Black lives matter, right? And the person on the receiving end of that has heard or interprets the phrase Black lives matter as Black lives matter more than other lives. But that's not what that means, right? Black Lives Matter, it's a rallying cry born out of the repeated instances of brutality against Black people. I know it was something that really became popular after Trayvon Martin. It's even become more, I think, common in our everyday vernacular recently. But something to consider is, since the goal is that we all should matter, we have to consider that all lives can't matter until Black lives matter, right? So with that said, when I hear the phrase all lives matter as a response to Black Lives Matter, I hear that Black lives are a second thought. So when I say Black Lives Matter, I'm saying that my Black friends, Black individuals, my Black colleagues need to matter just as much as you and me. So I guess I would implore the person who responds with the phrase, but all lives matter, I would implore them to consider that what they really mean with that message, what they really want to say when they say all lives matter. So I saw a really good meme. Many people in this room probably have seen it recently. It's just this funny little meme of two houses, one's on fire and somebody's got the fire hose to it, right? And they're trying to put out this fire, and somebody's looking at the other house that is not on fire and says, but what about that house? You know, all of the houses on this block matter. And it's just conveying that, hey, you know what? This is the one that's on fire. That's the one that we need to put our attention to. That's the one that we need to put this fire out before we can pay attention to all of them. So, you know, I would say, you know, sit for a moment and think, if all lives matter to you, then why is the phrase Black Lives Matter uncomfortable? And, you know, Yolanda or Dr. Harper mentioned before about, you know, some of our privilege. And, you know, I think not everyone gets the same opportunities, resources, respect, same kind of privilege, and especially when it comes to the color of their skin. So I think that it's really important that we're really considerate when we're thinking about the words that we're using. And we've talked before about creating those safe spaces. And I think that the words that we're using also can impact the safety of the spaces that we're in. So that's, I guess, what I would say about that. And it's a difficult conversation to have, and I think it's a healthy one to have as well. But I think that we also need to consider how we're creating the space that we're creating for others in our you know, teams and in our lives as well.
Thank you, Debbie. Jackie had indicated your analogy too in the chat right when you were telling the story. So I think that's a really good mental picture. Yolanda, did you want to add anything on to what Debbie was saying there?
A little bit. There's really not much to add, and I love the analogy as well. And the fact that someone will speak up and say, well, all lives matter to me, is an invitation to the conversation, because there are many that may be put off by the Black Lives Matter language or the work, and will remain silent. They don't even want to invite a conversation. So if someone actually speaks those words out loud, I think that's positive. And so if someone says, all lives matter, I'm going to assume first that their intent is positive unless proven otherwise. And so that's where the conversation begins. I take it as an invitation to dialogue, and Debbie gave some wonderful examples about how you might do that. So I'm going to first reflect on, well, how is it said? Is it, well, all lives matter to me? Or is it, well, you know, yeah, all lives matter. All lives matter to me. Or is it, yeah, but all lives matter. All of those communicate something very different. So how is it said? Isn't it ouch? Because they're feeling left out of the conversation. And maybe the analogy of the house on fire will help them be okay with sharing the attention. You know, sometimes if you have more than one child, and some children are great about sharing their attention, and others want all of the attention, and don't understand why it's appropriate sometimes to focus our attention to different people or different children, different movements, different concerns, different causes at different times, but it's not a neglect of the greater human rights for all. Is it anger because of their own personal histories and levels of frustration or fatigue? Unless we acknowledge the ouch, the pain that they're experiencing, there's not going to be any real dialogue. A lot of times when I've had conversations with people who are uncomfortable engaging with, or tired, just fatigued and tired of engaging in the conversations, it's not like that they completely disagree with what's being said. It's just their own life hurts too much. They have their own hurts. Is it a genuine interest in equitable rights and positive social justice for all? Sometimes when people say all lives matter, there's just like this glow around them. All lives matter to me. I'm reminded of a Hindu mantra, Loka Samasta Sukhi no Bhavantu, which means may all beings in all places in all parts of the universe be happy and free. And so some people say all lives matter with that kind of energy that creates space for BLM for all different facets of human rights movements. So is it said in a dismissive manner? Is it said in a loving manner? I'm never going to assume that is dismissive until I'm given evidence otherwise. I'm going to be grateful that someone said the words out loud because they're inviting a conversation. So I might say, well, that's cool. I also believe all lives matter. What are some things you do to demonstrate that? What are you doing? What kind of work are you doing to make the world a safer place for all? Sometimes when you create space to allow them to let their light shine, then they are more receptive and understanding of the nuances of the movements that are focused and more specific, like BLM. And then you can ask, do you think supporting BLM or being honest about social injustices for African Americans or one specific group means that we must abandon everyone else? Most people will say no to that. So again, there are many reasons one might say all lives matter. And I believe some positive intent can be found in most, if not all, individuals who are courageous enough to say those words out loud and create an opportunity to have a conversation.
Thank you. Great addition. Before we head into our next question, we did get a follow-up in the chat from Dr. Ivy, and I think this might be a good place to insert it, but it is kind of also has to do sort of with the question we answered earlier with Kingsley's lead off. But who can students, faculty, and staff connect with if they do not feel safe in our university environment? Anyone have any feedback on that one?
The question is for students, right? Who can students connect with?
Both, like who can our students or if a staff member or faculty member is not feeling safe in our environment that we're creating with in our university, who would you suggest they go to?
As a student, speaking from the perspective of a student, I have had the opportunity to be a student here at Ashford, and I know that anytime I've needed to feel support, and I may have not felt comfortable about a specific area, I am able to reach out to members of student services, speak to multiple representatives, speak to leadership within those areas until I'm able to get to a space and connect with an individual that I feel comfortable talking with, comfortable with expressing my concerns to. In my own role, I spend the majority of my time connecting with students who don't feel comfortable in certain situations, who don't feel like they may have been treated fairly or may have been treated with bias or things of that nature. So creating a space to listen to them, and if I'm not creating that space, connecting with someone that they feel comfortable who will listen to them, I think is our first priority for our students. Speaking staff-wise, I've always been able to connect with my leaders, my management, my directors, and they've always been very transparent, very supportive to me. If I've felt uncomfortable about something, they have supported me, been behind me, and have not forced me to do anything that I've ever felt uncomfortable doing.
Thank you, Kingsley. Go ahead, Debbie.
Yeah, no, I appreciate Kingsley sharing, especially as a perspective from a student. I would say, as a faculty member, and I know Dr. Harper mentioned she does this as well, but I think setting up our classroom as a space where students hopefully can feel comfortable coming to us if there is a concern. Now, of course, if they don't feel comfortable coming to us, I want them to go to their advisor, go to a staff member that they are comfortable going to, and hopefully that person will eventually get the message to whoever I report to or whoever that faculty member reports to. But I think part of our job is also, and I can only speak as a faculty member, part of our job is to set up our classroom in a way that allows for that conversation. I have started posting announcements, and it's a separate announcement in my classroom that basically just says this is an inclusive classroom. And I let students know that all students are welcome, whatever your experience, your background, your identity is. I expect all students to be respectful of each other. And then I very explicitly say, if you ever have a concern about how I react or I act towards you, or what I say to you or my behavior towards you, please let me know. And I want to make sure that my students feel comfortable if they are thinking that, maybe I said something, I did something in a way that doesn't honor who they are, that I do know. And I put that up front because I want them to know, because it is difficult, especially in an asynchronous classroom, to really demonstrate that I truly mean this. And so I want them to see right from the get-go that I have this classroom set up the way it is, and I want them to feel comfortable coming to me. But again, if they aren't comfortable for whatever reason, and I understand that, then hopefully they're able to go to other avenues as well.
And my first thought was, as an instructor, to first come, you can definitely, hopefully come to all of your instructors, but certainly my students can come to me, advisors. And then we do have a student affairs department that has a number of very compassionate and staff who advocate on behalf of students. There's access and wellness, depending on what type of concerns they have about safety, they can go there. Faculty and staff can, hopefully, we can all identify a few colleagues, supervisors that we can go to and ultimately talk it out with people in human resources if necessary as well.
Yeah, thank you all. And Rachel, our Director of Student Affairs, did put into the chat that she would suggest they connect with hopefully the one person they do feel safe with. Yeah. This is why establishing relationships is so important. So I think that just really echoes what each of you said. And I'll just add something really quick too. I mean, look at our Turn the Tide groups. Think about your small group discussions. We're creating a community amongst ourselves where we're creating safe places. So if there are staff or faculty or don't have that trust yet with their manager, I employ you to try to work on that relationship and build that trust. But come to the folks you see on the screen at these panelists and in your small discussions. They can be your ear to listen to and your shoulder and someone to talk to. So don't forget about this community as well that we're creating amongst ourselves. Thank you, Dr. Ivy, for the question, and thank you, panelists, for the follow-up. Okay, I believe, Kingsley, I'm coming over to you. Here's another question we received. As a person of color, how can I feel safe when individuals at times are reluctant to discuss stereotypes and racism in America, is one part. And then, what might we want others to know as they engage in conversations?
Thank you, Katie. I'll start this one by again circling back to things we've already discussed and the importance of not making an assumption about another person. There may be several reasons or several concerns that are real and tangible for another person not being willing to discuss something or being reluctant to engage in a conversation. So first, stepping back and not making an assumption that that person is doing so to intentionally have an impact on how I feel safe. That person is intentionally not talking to me about these things because they're trying to have a negative impact on me. Try to remove some of those barriers, try to remove some of those assumptions. Would be the best place to start in making a place for a conversation to happen while sharing your own thoughts and feelings and concerns. It can help to initiate a healthier conversation, which can lead to better results. We talked about, Dr. Harper, I recall her talking about things that might contribute to a person not being willing to engage in conversation, things like burnout, existing insecurities, lack of readiness, maybe a desire to just avoid the conversation in its totality. If you find yourself as a person of color, well, not as a person, but if you find yourself with a desire to engage in a conversation with a person of color, into some of these conversations, I do then have some suggestions that might help improve those conversations. One is to first recognize your privilege. I think we brought this up earlier as well. In Robin DiAngelo's book, White Fragility, she mentions that while implicit bias is always at play, because all humans have bias, inequity can simply occur through homogeneity. If I'm not aware of the barriers that you face, I won't see them, much less be motivated to remove them. So first recognize who you are, where you are, prior to going and engaging in these conversations. Second, educate yourself. Educate yourself on the things that you need to personally learn and or unlearn in order to engage in these conversations. Where we multiple perspectives. It's such an important point on educating yourself. Try to reflect as you on your own self as you navigate through these conversations. Recognize that sometimes silence can be complicit. Silence can communicate a lot of things. Or you might be acting as if something is not happening. But if the silence is due to you being uncomfortable, begin to navigate speaking up about what makes you uncomfortable. Speaking up about how you feel can help progress these conversations. Speaking about what impacts you as an individual can help to lead to healthier versions of these conversations. And lastly, just a suggestion to be on equal ground. Sometimes these conversations can be initiated in environments where one person might not feel as safe being a minority in the environment. Strive to engage or access environments where you're in racially diverse spaces, more casual environments. This will help to reduce pressures that an individual might be feeling and provide an opportunity for them to speak more freely. Speaking more personally, if you're engaging in these conversations with me, I want you to know that I care about how society shapes my race and how my race shapes my experience in society. I believe that I want to learn more about race and racism together. I believe we must all play a part in the solution. It's important to me that in these conversations, there is a time to act towards solutions. Some of these acts could be as simple as taking a few notes to further your understanding or identify talking points when having difficult conversations about race issues. I want to affect positive change within others in my community. And those are my tips. That's my advice. Thank you.
Those are great, Kingsley. Thank you. Yolanda or Debbie, would you like to add on anything?
I can't think of much to add. I think it was beautifully stated. I get, since coming from a behavioral science perspective, the only thing I'll pull out of that question was, how can I feel safe when? And regardless of what follows that phrase, at some point we can, if we so choose, make a choice to feel safe regardless. And then from that place of safety, then we can find others who will engage in the conversation. Or we can choose to stay in that space with someone who's not ready to engage in a conversation and talk about ourselves and say, well, it's not always about me. And then at the same time, go back and forth between when it's my time to tell my story and when it's my time to listen to that other person's story. And sometimes just listening to what the other person is dealing with, why they don't feel comfortable discussing the stereotypes and the isms in America and in the world. Just giving them a little space to talk about what they're going through makes them more receptive than to hearing what we might want to share in terms of racism and the other isms and stereotypes. But feeling safety, especially the psychological part of it, it's not 100%, but a good portion of it is a personal choice.
Great. Thank you. So that comes to the end of our questions, and I'm going to try and multitask here for a second. I'm going to pull a slide up. Moppy has been dropping in the link to join our. Can you guys see my screen? Can I get an acknowledgement? Do you see the slide for the join us for the small group conversations?
Yes.
Okay. So just encourage you guys here in the next hour at 11, we are spinning off into our small group discussions. Moppy has been dropping the link into the chat. And again, I would just like to thank so much Kingsley, Yolanda, and Debbie for bringing your perspectives and creating this environment for us all to share. Moppy and Yvonne and Rachel behind the scenes, getting us going. But please, all of us here, join us. You're invited to continue the conversation. And like I stated, Moppy has been sharing the link in the chat. And I've written down so many tidbits I wanted to share again, but there's so much more to explore and to go into the small group conversation. So I'll just check the chat here and see if we have any questions before we break off.
There is a question. I don't know if you want us to send comments later or if there's time for someone to address it. Bill Davis's question.
Sure. We do have a few more minutes. It says, how can third-party intervention help resolve conflicted situations to help resolve some situations to make people feel safer? What can a leader do?
I feel slightly connected to that question, just because on a daily basis I'm that third party intervention in a lot of situations. I'm not sure if you're connecting the question though as the leader being that third party intervener in your question. But just considering yourself as a third party and you have two people in conflict, it's important to engage those two people in ways that they feel safe and they don't feel attacked and they don't feel they don't feel heard, and to gather both of their perspectives and to be a neutral person, a neutral party. It's very important to remain neutral. When you remain neutral, people feel safe, people are willing to share information. And once you've gathered and collected that information, then you can begin to identify potential gaps, common threads, relationships, ways to bring the two parties together and reconnect that and talk about, get others to challenge others to think differently. But it all starts with first being able to engage each of those individuals in their safe spaces and being neutral. I think that's very important.
Thank you. Thank you, Kingsley.
That's great.
Trying to read, okay. So again, thank you to all the panelists. You guys are getting many bravos in the chat, and I echo all those sentiments. Thank you for showing up today. Thank you for creating a safe place for all of us to join together to have this conversation. And thank you for trusting all of us with your personal experiences and your stories. And please, I encourage each of you at 11 o'clock, click the link and join the small group discussions and dive in a little bit deeper to some of these amazing, wonderful points that were shared today. And I thank you all for joining us.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. We'll see you in a few, hopefully.
Thank you.
Thank you.